Welcome to the Ari Goldkind Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167. Here's Ari Goldkind.
Good to be with you all. We're going to do a show that's a little bit different than the ones of the last weeks. I've done this before. It's not easy. It's quite a test. But I'm going to do the whole show talking about all of the things over the last couple of weeks that have bothered me. We've had such incredible guests over the last month or two that I haven't had the time, and that's a good thing, to do the opening statements and the monologues and the rants and raves that I want to do. So I decided this week, given it's such a heavy news week, for those of you in Canada, it was a big week in the bail courts. You may know the name Tamara Lich. We're going to do a lot about that tonight. We're going to save another one of our fantastic guests for next week. And tonight you're going to get me for the hour. And so much of the feedback that I get in doing the Ari Goldkind show here on Sirius XM Canada Talks Channel 167 is that while the audience and everybody loves the guests, and I'm very flattered that you think we pick great guests, very unusual guests, guests that don't get a lot of airplay throughout Canada, I also get told and asked a lot, well, do more of your opening statement. Tell us more about what you think of the world. And as much as I do a little bit of that on anti-social media, which we call Twitter, I'm going to take the opportunity tonight to get into some other stories that we haven't really covered, but to get to them more in depth and to talk about all of the things going on in this world that bother me, and a number of things in this world that I think are actually fantastic. And just in case you're wondering, we are recording this by audio. So if you're listening on Sirius XM Canada Talks Channel 167, we're also going to record me by video talking tonight. And I'm going to post this on YouTube under the Ari Goldkind show. So if you want to watch it, you'll be able to, but we obviously want everybody listening on Sirius XM Canada Talks Channel 167. So here we go for the full hour of literally Ari Goldkind. And I don't talk about myself in the third person like Bob Dole, so don't worry about that. I'm not Bob Dole, and I'm most certainly not The Rock. So let's get to the story that really bothers me the most this week. It's one that has continued to be under my skin for about the last 2 weeks or so, and it is the Tamara Lich saga. I think most of you are familiar with the Tamara Lich story, at least some of the headlines, some of the background. You know the terms freedom convoy. But what has happened in a bail court in Ottawa last week, particularly Tuesday and Friday, is, to me, who you may know, and I think you know, I am a criminal lawyer. I've been doing it for about 15 years plus. I've been a lawyer for 20 years. I've never seen something in a bail court that has disappointed me more or made me wonder what our bail system is about and whether our bail system has brought the administration of justice or public confidence in the bail system into disrepute. So let's talk about Tamara Lich. And I'm going to talk about this with the presumption that many of you may not like her. You may not like her cause, the Freedom Convoy, how it completely clogged up Ottawa with the honking and the horns and the traffic, that the blockades were terrible and impacting and interfering with Canadian travel and Canadian commerce. Everything I'm going to talk about tonight vis-a-vis Tamara Lich is not catering to people who like her cause or support the cause. It's really whether or not you like her or her cause, just how badly our bail courts, our police system, and our Crown Attorney system failed last week. Tamara Lich, as you know, is alleged to be one of the ringleaders of the Freedom Convoy. There seems to be no dispute about that. I don't even think her lawyer disputes it. A while ago, she gets charged and arrested for some mischief charges, some obstruction charges, very, very minor charges, no matter what anybody tells you, not treason, not sedition, not overflowing the government. She gets charged with some very minor mischief and obstruction charges, amongst others. If she was ever convicted of these things, she would never be looking at jail. No chance, no way. She has no criminal record. There's no violence to these offenses. People can make stuff up on Twitter, same as they do about January 6th. Totally made up stuff. We may get to that later. But at no point would Tamara Lich have ever gone to jail. What ends up happening is she has a bail hearing and she's detained by an Ontario court judge. That Ontario court judge, and this is a real problem, and you'll know where I'm going, at the bail hearing where that judge detained Tamara Lich, said she, the judge, this being, was impacted herself by the convoy. Now, one would wonder, if you yourself experience something, should you or are you able to sit on a bail hearing with full impartiality? I think the answer to that is yes. She's not a juror, she's a judge. And you could make the easy argument that murders, rapes, child molestation, home invasions affect people in Ottawa or any city they happen the same as a convoy. But you could also see why people would be concerned that if you've had something happen to you as a judge personally, maybe you'd be a little bit pissed off, for lack of a judicious way of putting it, with the person in charge of that convoy. Tamara Lich is detained. That decision, in my view, was ridiculous. And I said so. And I said she should be in the Superior Court in 2 seconds. She goes to the Superior Court for what's called the bail review. She's released. She spends about 18 nights in jail before this happens. Just so you all know, 18 nights more than convicted drunk drivers, 18 nights more than men who have pushed or shoved or hit their wives, many of whom who will never do a day in jail. They'll get what's called a conditional discharge or a suspended sentence. But there are so many people, thousands across Canada, who commit violence and other kinds of serious crimes, defrauding old ladies. I can go into a whole bunch of things that are unlikely, if ever, to receive a day in jail. That's upon conviction. Tamara Lich is presumed innocent. And again, I'm not her fan. I've never met her, don't know her, don't know what I'd think of her if I met her, don't support the convoy, don't support the honking, don't support the blockades. But there are bigger issues at play, particularly if you're Canadian listening to us right now. And so at a Superior Court, she's released on bail. The bail is expensive, it's overbroad, it's probably more serious than people who fire guns or possess weapons in Toronto, but I'll digress. She gets released. Then there is this gala dinner that many of you may know about called the George Jonas Freedom Award, a dinner organized by the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. Now, the ultimate irony is that this dinner is set up to protest the growing power and abusive power of the state. Not only the government, but wings and arms of the government, the police services. Obviously, this is not, everything linked to federal and Trudeau. There are different branches of government, but government is government. It's like when people complain about tax dollars going here, or one government says this isn't a federal matter, or your taxes go provincially. Well, it's all one pocket. The taxpayer is one person. They're all interconnected. So we're going to play a little bit of connect the dots. So this dinner is something that comes to the attention of one specific Crown attorney in Ottawa, and it's a him, and I will be referring to him throughout our discussion of Tamara Lich. And he decides, when there was a bail review brought to loosen or relax her bail conditions, this one Crown decides, I want to not only oppose that request that she can go to the dinner, relax some conditions, he says she's going to breach by going to this dinner. A Superior Court judge says, no, she can go to this dinner, just follow the bail. So the Crown at another opportunity loses the opportunity to get her jugged, which in my business means rotting in jail, until her trial. Why is losing bail and rotting in jail until your trial particularly problematic? Because if you don't get bail, you are much more likely, especially if you're in what's called a time-served position, you're much more likely to plead guilty to something you would never otherwise have pled guilty to, because you just want to get out. So as much as you listening to this tonight would say, well, I would never plead guilty to something I didn't do, I can assure you, listening here to the Ari Goldkind show on Sirius XM Canada Talks channel 167, if you don't get bail, you're a significant factor. I don't know what the multiplication is, a factor of 2, 3, 4, 5 times more likely to plead guilty. You get less time to talk to your lawyer, you get less time to review your file. So the judge says she can go to the dinner in Toronto. I think it was in Toronto, I'm not sure, it doesn't really matter. And she attends. She gives a speech. By all means, the speech is incredibly well received and well regarded, even though, of course, it's a biased audience in the room. She's also sitting at a table filled with enemies of the state. Rex Murphy, if you know who he is, Tom Marazzo or Matarazzo, I don't actually know what his name is, I don't care, but a bunch of enemies of the state that our prosecution service in Ottawa, one Crown attorney, who has made it his seemingly life's mission to stifle dissent, to go after people who simply oppose an opposing view of our government, of lockdowns, of mandates. Now he gets wind that there's a picture, and the officers, the Ottawa police, really get wind that there are pictures of the gala dinner, and there's a picture of Tamara Lich standing next to somebody she's not allowed to talk to. I emphasize, there's a picture of her standing and sitting at the table next to somebody she's not allowed to talk to unless she's in front or with her lawyers. I'm paraphrasing. But what seems extremely problematic to this one Crown attorney and 2 officers, we'll get to them, is that as she comes off the stage, one of these enemies of the state that in her bail paper she's not allowed to communicate with unless in the presence of her lawyers, there's a 3-second hello or acknowledgement of somebody's existence. It lasts 3 seconds. That's not me making it up. That's the time that was introduced in the bail hearing. And for those transgressions, and I kid you not, for those transgressions in a room filled with lawyers, filled with her civil lawyers at the very least who are representing her in court, for 3 seconds and a photo op, 2 homicide detectives in Ottawa, 2 homicide detectives in Ottawa. The word homicide, you know what that means. As if Tamara Lich has changed her name to Paula Bernardo, 2 homicide detectives take out a Canada-wide warrant, a Canada-wide warrant for her arrest. What that means is that in English, she's going to be arrested. She's not going to be released in Medicine Hat, Alberta. She's going to be flown back to Ottawa on your expense, your tax dollar expense. She's going to be jailed for a number of nights in Ottawa until her bail hearing is even heard. And this is a kind of warrant that is absolutely unheard of. I emphasize, absolutely unheard of when there is a non-violent breach offense. Breach means failing to comply with conditions. And for those of you who say, well, you know, it's a gray area. She said hello to the man. She sat at the wrong table, even though her lawyers weren't in the picture. I can assure you that every day across Canada, even if you believe this is a breach, which I don't, and I think the prosecution will lose at trial, we'll get to that. Even if you don't think that, I can tell you that there are a number of breaches every day in the city that you live in that are not investigated. They're not taken seriously. They're not investigated by homicide detectives pretending she's Paula Bernardo. There are no arrests made. And if arrests are made, that person is released later that day or the next day on bail. And the people are on bail for violence, domestic abuse, drinking and driving, beating up a spouse, sexual assault, gun offenses, drug dealing offenses, you name it. But Tamara Lich is special because Tamara Lich is a political prisoner. You would think that she is somebody that China is prosecuting in one of the 2 Michaels prosecutions that you're all familiar with. And a political prisoner doesn't have to be something beaten over the head. It's when somebody is arrested or charged with crimes where you can make a cogent and reasonable link that there is a political aspect to it. That's all it has to be. That's what it means to be a political prisoner, where you can demonstrate in a reasonable way, one could say with a balance of probabilities, you can look up these definitions yourself, that the nature, the impetus, the motive by arresting that person is to silence or stifle their voice or people that they might be influencing or representing. Tamara Lich is a political prisoner, period. So she's arrested, she's brought back to Ottawa, and she has a bail hearing Tuesday of last week. It is a bail hearing where the Crown Attorney, aided and abetted by one homicide detective, basically paints Tamara Lich out to be the most dangerous woman in Canada. The most dangerous woman in Canada. Think that through. Not killers, not child abusers, not people who neglect their kids and leave them to grow up in squalor, not bad foster parents. I'm just using female examples. Not somebody who drove carelessly with their kids in the car or drove 3 times the legal limit with kids in the car. But Tamara Lich, because she thinks lockdowns, which without argument have ruined the economy, lockdowns which in our supply chain, this country and others, have made the inflation be what the inflation that you're now experiencing and suffering through, that her position on lockdowns and vaccine mandates, vaccines that if you open up CNN or the Toronto Star, literally today, the Toronto Star is talking about how vaccines no longer work against BA4 and 5, BA6 is coming, that's Omicron variants, that if you don't think the government should force you to take a shot so that you can get on a plane, train, or automobile, or you can keep your job, this is key, or you can keep your job, that if you have that view and advocate that view, you should be arrested, or if not arrested, canceled. Now, you don't have to agree with Tamara Lich, but how in a democracy is her viewpoint illiberal, undemocratic, or dangerous? Now, I'm not talking about blockading a highway. That's a completely different fish. I'm not talking about honking your horn and keeping the people of Ottawa up all night. That deserves arrests. You heard it here. That kind of conduct deserves to be arrested. But that's not why she's dangerous. That's not why she was arrested. That's not why the Emergencies Act, in one of the great disgraces of our time, was invoked. It is to silence people that the government wants silenced. It is a government that silences dissent. And the most disturbing aspect of this from the bail point of view that we're talking about in this segment is that the machinery, the weaponry of the criminal justice system, the arrest power of the police, the tremendous and often unchecked power of the state. And if you don't know how hard it is to check the power of a Crown Attorney who decides to go after you, or police officers who decide to arrest you on the flimsiest of evidence, it's not as easy as you think, where the cliche is just have your day in court and then sue somebody. That's not the way the Canadian justice system works or doesn't work. So she now has to sing for her supper, where the Crown not only arrests her for this 3-second breach, but wants to cancel her bail. And at this bail hearing, the Crown suggests that she's a threat to Canada and that her release would affect public confidence in the administration of justice. The Crown compares Tamara Lich to somebody who deals drugs or smuggles or uses firearms, says that she could be liable for up to 10 years in jail, paints her with a picture that her name is literally Paula Bernardo. Her lawyer, a very able lawyer in Ottawa, points out, and to use his terms, that this is poppycock. I don't know what that word means, but that's his word, that there is no basis to this breach, that the breach will not stand up in court, that she had permission to go to the gala, that her lawyers were in the room. And, you know, everybody seemed to predict that the Justice of the Peace would push back on this and say this arrest and this bail hearing was ridiculous. everybody, all the pundits seem to say, all the experts seem to say that this justice of the peace would push back and release her in 2 seconds. And he would hear the Crown attorneys over bleeding and overstating his case. And the Crown attorney essentially calling her Paula Bernardo, the same Crown attorney who's been behind all these prosecutions, the guy who has more of a bee in his bonnet for the Canadian that is Tamara Lich than even a basic understanding of what it means to be Canadian and free. His idea of this is completely perverse. I don't even blame the police officers the way I blame this one Crown attorney. And as I've said many times, I sincerely wonder what his fellow Crown attorneys in the Ottawa Crown Attorney's office think of what he's doing. I wonder if they were able to speak freely without fear of censure or anything else like that, if they agree with what their Crown Attorney's office is doing, spending this kind of time on Tamara Lich, having 2 homicide detectives fly out to Medicine Hat. You don't think there are enough homicides in Ottawa and rapes and sexual assaults to investigate? I assure you they are. But the hope of everybody online, all the so-called armchair experts, is that the Justice of the Peace would release her in 2 seconds. He'd push back. But what he did on Tuesday annoyed me to no end. He reserved his decision for 3 nights. 3 more nights for Tamara Lich, presumed innocent, who has a right to an expeditious bail hearing, usually within 24 hours of her release. He makes her spend 3 more nights in jail while he thinks about his decision and decides what he wants to do. Those 3 nights in and of themselves were egregious. She was entitled to know forthwith, that's a legal term, whether or not she was going to be released or not. And if she was not, those 3 nights were wasted before her lawyers could take her to Superior Court. Now, judges reserve, justices of the peace reserve. It happens. You want somebody to think, digest everything. There was so little to digest here. There was so little to process that just the decision to keep her in jail another 3 nights was, to me, an affront to our democratic and, quite frankly, criminal justice process. And it seemed to be that the Friday where the decision was rendered was just a matter of convenience when he was sitting next. She should have had her decision later that day, or at the very least the next day. But this is where I started to think, I don't think the experts are correct on what this Justice of the Peace is going to do, because if he was as outraged by the Crown's presentation of the case or the police action here, he probably wouldn't have made her stew in jail for another 3 nights. We're going to take a quick break here on the Ari Goldkind Show on Sirius XM Canada Talks Channel 167, and we're going to continue with what happened on Friday and what this Justice of the Peace did, and what I think it means to our criminal justice system and to our political system in what we still call Canada a democracy. After last Friday and the now judicial system's condemnation of telling Canadians to shut up if you're unpopular or if you go against the machine or the party in power, we're going to continue in 2 minutes talking about what the bail decision was.
Welcome back to the Ari Goldkind Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome back to the Ari Goldkind Show. I'm hoping you know the name Tamara Lich. I'm hoping you were enjoying segment 1. Let's now get to where this all goes and why I think this should be so upsetting to you as a Canadian, whether you're on her side or not, whether you love or hate the Freedom Convoy or not, whether you support her cause or not. None of those things are cogent responses to the fact that on Friday, with prejudice, a Justice of the Peace not only doesn't push back on the exaggerating and the exaggeration of the Crown's presentation of their case, the police conduct to homicide detectives taking a Canada-wide warrant out for 3 nights, making her wait in jail for 9 or 10 nights for a bail hearing. The Justice of the Peace basically uses his opportunity to take shots at Tamara Lich. At one point criticizing her lawyer's submission as ridiculous, that there were lawyers in the room during this gala dinner, which there were. But then the justice of the peace, in detaining her and saying she's a threat to the safety and security of Canadians. Imagine that. This little mere woman from Medicine Hat, Alberta, who goes to a gala dinner to receive an award for freedom and speaking out against abuses of power, this little woman, and I don't say that as a pejorative, you get the idea of what I mean. This little person, this theoretical nobody, is so powerful that her release for taking a picture and it being posted on Facebook is a threat to the safety and security of Canadians. Something more ridiculous, I don't think I've ever heard. And you may say, well, that's a justice of the peace. You have to agree with him. You're a criminal lawyer. No, I don't. That's what appeal courts are for. And within 10 seconds of the decision, her lawyer, in more judicial terms, arguably, said he had instructions to take the matter immediately to the Superior Court. That's a lawyer's way of saying he thinks that the decision below is ridiculous. And it's my view that not only was the decision improper, it was dangerous to our rule of law. To mock Tamara Lich, to pretend she's a danger to the safety and security of Canadians. He said that the public needs to be protected from her. And then he used what's called the tertiary ground of bail to say that the charges are so serious, the events are so serious, the picture on Facebook is so serious that he compares her to people who smuggle or shoot off guns or possess firearms or who are going to get penitentiary sentences, or where the Crown's case is so strong that it's overwhelming, which it ain't in this case, I assure you. This breach isn't going to stick. It's just not. Or that her release would bring the administration of justice into disrepute, or in less fancy terms, the public's confidence in the bail system would fall apart like a house of cards, like Jenga, if she was released. This makes me angry. There are 325 people at least right now, according to the Toronto Police Service, just my city, who have been released on bail for serious gun charges or when they have criminal records for gun charges or weapons prohibitions in the past. And they're released on fail to comply charges. Every criminal lawyer telling you the truth can tell you just how many and how often they get clients out on breaches of serious charges, including serious breaches, not photo ops on Facebook. And you can make the argument that those people should be released. They can be safely released. The judges have made the right call. That's a different argument for a different day. But for today's purposes, this justice of the peace treated her like she's Paula Bernardo. And if you think that it can be proven that Tamara Lich had the mens rea, the intention, this is key, ladies and gentlemen, the intention when she took that picture or sat at the dinner table where the dinner itself was vetted by a Superior Court judge when the Crown tried to get her canceled, for lack of a better term, to going. If you think she said, well, I'm being videotaped, while I'm being recorded, while this speech is being recorded, while people are taking pictures of us to take pictures and post them, that I have the intention of flouting my expensive bail and breaching this court order, well, that's just idiotic. And not for 1 second did the court deal with the realities of this situation or away from this false equivalency that somehow she's some danger to the safety and security of Canadians. This was vulgar, in my view. This was giving the state, the Crown, the police, the ability now to go off and arrest whoever they want for committing mischief or disturbing the peace, which we've seen is the umbrella charge for the last 2 years of COVID, disturbing the peace, a charge that you never have seen in Canadian jurisprudence used as often as it has been in the last 2 years of COVID. But now, not only did a Crown and 2 police officers, homicide cops, say to themselves, we can go out and arrest whoever we want as long as they're enemies of the state, A court didn't push back on that. And think through the message that that sends to Canadians when they think about the Emergencies Act. Well, if I'm on Tamara Lich's side, I could get my bank account frozen. If I don't think there should be mandatory lockdowns and that small businesses should be killed, and I speak out about it, I'm going to get canceled or arrested. If I want to run for office and say that vaccine mandates, forcing people to get shots to keep their jobs or get on a train, are improper and illiberal, let people have vaccines. Have all the vaccines you want. Prove the vaccines work. Have a discussion. Are they efficacious against the virus? Are they efficacious against the variants? You're not even allowed to have that conversation anymore unless the Toronto Star says so, which they did today. But 6 months ago, you would have gotten banned from the Toronto Star or Twitter from saying that. But think through the power that one justice of the peace said is okay that the Crown Attorney's Office and the police in Ottawa have, which is if you're an enemy of the state, if you question authority, forget being booted off of Twitter. You can be arrested. And if you say back to me, well, Ari, she had the bail paper. She knew she couldn't be near that guy. She knew she couldn't even have him say great speech after. Well, then you're living in a different world than me, or you don't know the way the criminal justice system works at just how often it turns a blind eye to serious criminality or breaches. Or if you disagree with that, gives people a second chance. This is abhorrent in a free society. If you read that this was done by a state, by a government, jailing somebody like this, jailing somebody for mischief, making somebody go to the Superior Court and bankrupt themselves in legal fees, all the while saying they can't raise money on GoFundMe or all these other sites because they'll get taken down, or people who want to donate money of $25 or $50 to pay her lawyer fees will get deplatformed and defunded. Things you'll never see with BLM, things you'll never see with riots, things you'll never see with actual violence so long as you're on the far left. They'll never be deplatformed. They'll never be defunded. What you saw here was something like you'd see in China. We're jailing somebody for a year or two until her trial because somebody said good speech as she comes off the stage or took a picture with her. A picture. It's the same nonsense when people go after Prime Minister Trudeau or Pierre Poilievre or Aaron O'Toole, as he then was, for taking pictures with lunatics. We don't go after people because they somehow have vetted everybody that they come into contact with. I'm no fan of Trudeau, but when I see people going on Twitter and saying, look, he took a picture next to this person, and somehow that's his fault. He's supposed to know every idiot that comes up to him at a function. I never thought the blackface thing was significant or serious. I thought that was a joke. If that's the best you can go after Trudeau for, you're an idiot. He is a terrible prime minister and is making this country worse in a number of ways. But the idea that because he was wearing blackface, that's the strongest argument mouth breathers have against him 20 years ago or 25 years ago in a different era, in a different time, when the people in the room with him were laughing and didn't care, including people of color, that's the strongest argument. This is a real problem we have in our society where we make things that are not equivalent, we try and make them equivalent. That's a false equivalency. And I'm sorry, this is stuff that happens in China. This is stuff that happens in countries that are illiberal and undemocratic. And it is, to me, one of the more significant features of this story that you see Twitter, the cesspool that is Twitter, celebrating when she didn't get bail. And what did people say when she didn't get bail? They didn't say, well, she flagrantly breached her bail. They didn't get into the understanding of that the Superior Court knew about the dinner. The answer was she tried to overthrow Canada We hate her and we hate her cause. So she should be jailed indefinitely. Think through in what we call a democracy, where people on one side say, jail your opponents on the other. It's as insane, damaging, and undemocratic as when Trump, in one of his worst moments during those rallies, kept saying, lock Hillary Clinton up, and people celebrated it. The left thought that was insane, undemocratic, and dangerous. Tamara Lich is a lot less important than Hillary Clinton, and arguably committed far fewer crimes of a significant nature. Not that I think Hillary Clinton ever committed a crime, but the FBI certainly investigated her for it and affected the election, if you know what James Comey did to her the week before the election. But this is really third world, Kafkaesque stuff. And it's dangerous, because if you do the shoe on the other foot test, which isn't that hard to do, the shoe on the other foot test is, well, would you be this happy if Tamara Lich was on the side of BLM, or was against Pierre Poilievre, or was for climate change, or was part of the Green New Deal, or was supporting anything that the far left supports? How do you think these people on Twitter or the far left would react if a Poilievre government, if an Andrew Scheer government, if an Aaron O'Toole government had the exact kind of case for somebody who organized a BLM or climate change rally in downtown Toronto with some trucks, some honking, and other things? That person was charged with mischief and other various non-serious crimes. And then that picture of a BLM organizer or a climate change organizer, they were welcomed to a dinner that's to protest the Conservative Party. And as that person leaves the stage, they're congratulated by somebody that's not allowed to congratulate them, and then sits at a table surrounded by lawyers in the room, and sits at a table with enemies of the conservative state. If the shoe on the other foot test doesn't work, your argument is empty. This was a very, very dark and very sad day in the Canadian bail system. And if you're celebrating that this woman is rotting in jail, while repeat drunk drivers, while rapists, while people in Ottawa who are charged with one crime, sex assault, get bail the next day and go out and kill people, I could give you 100 examples of bail releases that you who hate Tamara Lich or don't support her, that you've never said a word about, when somebody dealing fentanyl or shooting somebody or possessing loaded weapons, when they get bail and they breach those conditions, breaching a curfew or a house arrest, you don't seem awfully angry about that. There is something pernicious that took place in an Ottawa bail court last Friday, and hopefully the Tamara Lich bail team, lawyers, will take her bail matter up to the Superior Court lickety-split. And what I'm hoping is a brave Superior Court judge looks at this with fresh eyes, unbiased eyes, and says that what the Justice of the Peace did was pure and simple legal error. I'm outraged by it. I'm hoping you're outraged by it, because if they can arrest her in the ways that they did, God forbid if you don't like the Trudeau government and you send $25 somebody's way, or you take part in a protest where there's no violence, not a hair on somebody's head is ever touched, affected, or moved, and then you participate in a dinner where you're alleged to have committed the poochiest, least serious breach in history, if they can come for this little woman in medicine hat, that means they can come for you. We'll be back in 2 minutes on the Ari Goldkind Show, and we're going to move south of the border to Joe Biden and his flack and mouthpiece, Karine Jean-Pierre, because those two have been bothering me for no end for the last number of weeks as well, and it's time we talk about them.
You're listening to the Ari Goldkind Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome back to the Ari Goldkind Show. I appreciate you listening to that. That was my take of Tamara Lich. It really bothered me throughout the whole ordeal of it, the whole week of it. It's really been bothering me as a criminal defense lawyer. So I appreciate you all listening to it, and hopefully it gave you food for thought. Let's move south of the border. We live in a world right now where elegance is gone. Civility is gone. Decorum is gone. I just finished reading a book about Roger Federer. It's really a great book. And it's all about his life and his journey to becoming Roger Federer. And a big part of that book is devoted to Roger Federer being an extraordinarily temperamental, angry player in his late teens and the early part of his career, throwing rackets, yelling at umpires, not dealing with opponents properly. And he had an epiphany, and people gave him an intervention where he was told it's completely improper behavior. It's beneath him. It insults the game. And Roger Federer made a decision that he's worked on every day since to not be that person and to be the model of elegance that we all think of Roger Federer to be. Wimbledon was on Sunday, and there is a boor, a disgusting person named Nick Kyrgios, who, because he's really good at tennis, gets a pass. Also, because he ticks a certain demographic checkbox, nobody has the courage to go after him as the boor and disgusting, unsportsmanlike competitor that he is. And just because you're good at something, or because you tick a demographic checkbox, you get a pass. That is sickening. And when you look at how he behaves throughout his career, Nick Kyrgios or Kyrgios, I don't know how you pronounce it, doesn't matter, the Australian. And you look at how he behaved throughout Wimbledon. The fact that he isn't constantly disqualified is sickening. If he didn't tick the demographic checkbox that he did, he'd be gone. And John McEnroe got in some trouble yesterday because he said Nick Kyrgios went too far. And people say, well, John McEnroe, who is he to say anything about somebody? Well, John McEnroe yelled, "You cannot be serious." He didn't go after people in the audience. He didn't try and attack umpires in the way Kyrgios does. You look at any compilation of who Nick Kyrgios is versus John McEnroe 30 years ago being John McEnroe. And John McEnroe never got a pass for it. 30 years later than his career, he's retired for a long time. You still don't hear the name John McEnroe without thinking of John McEnroe, not just his excellence, but the "you cannot be serious." And the point of the story is we live in a world where vulgarity trumps civility, where bad sportsmanship, where bad behavior trumps elegance and decorum, where being unsportsmanlike dominates being sportsmanlike. And he, this guy who got to Wimbledon, was beaten by a class act named Novak Djokovic, who again learned how to behave on a court, tries to control his temper. But we live in a world where we celebrate the monstrous behavior of a Kyrgios, a person who is unhinged, a person who doesn't care about the game, a person who doesn't care about his predecessors, whether it be Arthur Ashe or anybody else. A person who doesn't care about the great game of tennis, which is an elegant game. It would be no different than if Tiger Woods, somebody similar to Nick Kyrgios's demographic, started whipping golf clubs all over the golf course, or whipping them at lines officials, or whipping them at people in the stands, or if Tiger Woods yelled at people in the stands and called them names or drunks and blamed them for not sinking a birdie putt. It would be like Tiger Woods getting a pass for it, and Tiger Woods wouldn't get a pass for it. But it's no different. And it is sickening to watch this person who is unhinged, out of control, and to me, the antithesis of the great game of tennis and elegance and sportsmanship, that just because he's good, he gets a pass. Let me move to a piece of good news for the week before we get to ending on what I think we'll end on, which is Joe Biden and Karine Jean-Pierre. I saw Top Gun last week, and I have to tell you, and I'm making sure I have enough time, that it is absolutely fantastic. You've heard me on this show. It's my show here on Sirius XM Canada Talks Channel 167 to talk about things you may not have seen or things you may love. And if you haven't seen Top Gun, you really should head to the theater. There's a really nice part at the beginning where Tom Cruise thanks people for coming back to the theater, that it's a big screen experience. It really starts things out well. And this is a movie made for adults. It's got nuance, it's got action, there's no CGI, and if there is, I couldn't find it, maybe one scene with Ed Harris. I'm not going to tell you anything about the movie, but they don't make movies like this anymore. Everything is an Avenger, everything is a superhero, everything is woke, which I think is broke. Everything hits you over the head with relationships that more power to each and to their own. But this is a movie that is old school. It's exciting. The cast is diverse, so clearly Tom Cruise knows what he has to do in 2022 to get budgets done, to make it appealing to a global audience. Not that it wouldn't have been appealing with a different cast, but every single thing about it is exciting. It's a fantastic movie. The slow scenes in it are fantastic. Don't just think I'm talking about the flight scenes, the scenes with Jennifer Connelly, the scenes with Val Kilmer, the scenes with other military brass. As much as we beat up Tom Cruise for Scientology, and we should beat him up for it because he is half-baked nuts when it comes to any time he loses his cool or his ability to control himself when talking about that crazy religion. He is as good as it gets. And it is a movie that for 2 hours, you cannot take your eyes off of that screen. You're emotionally invested in it. And it is just unbelievably fantastic. And speaking of unbelievably fantastic, which ties into a theme of this evening, just posted on Netflix is Dave Chappelle giving a 37-minute speech to his alma mater, to the Duke Ellington School for the Arts that helped make Dave Chappelle what it is. Now, why am I telling you about it? Because I don't have his way with words. I'm not funny like him. I don't have the ability to piece words together the way he does. I'm a trial lawyer. I think I'm pretty damn good at it, but he is a master, and he'll tell you in his special what a master he is at his craft. But the part of it for 37 minutes that's so riveting is him talking about being an artist. And he should be able to express himself and his art and his humor as he sees fit. And he goes after the people who last year went at him, particularly students in that school who said he shouldn't be able to tell jokes about whoever he wants. And for 37 minutes, Dave Chappelle will hold you in the palm of his hands about when you take away and try and censor or cancel people's ability to say what they want, to speak with nuance and artistic expression, whether they're a painter, a sculptor, or a comedian. Comedians who are supposed to push back against the sacred cows, the people that claim they're victims but wield their victimhood as a sword, not a shield. It is 37 minutes that will absolutely, absolutely rivet you. And let's get to the part this week that in a very different way drives me nuts, probably more than Tamara Lich. I don't know, I'm 48 years old. I don't know how old you are. We are living through the time of the worst president, I think, in the history of the United States, at least in the modern era. You cannot seriously make a claim that Trump was a worse president than Biden. You can't make that claim on COVID, deaths, the economy, vaccines, jobs, inflation, freedom of speech, immigration, you name it. You can hate the bad orange man all you want. But right now, even the left, you can go to the New York Times today and read about this yourself. When the far left and the left are now saying that this guy is so gone, so in the throes of what seems to be senility or dementia that he can't read off a teleprompter. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google what he did this week. It is, as much as it's funny and Anchorman Ron Burgundy like, it's embarrassing. This is the person who's supposed to be the president and the most powerful person in the free world. He's a joke. His wife is propping him up like he's Bernie at Weekend at Bernie's. Terry Kaiser does a better job in the role. If you don't know who Terry Kaiser is, go to the Google machine. But to watch what Joe Biden did this week with the teleprompter is just astounding. And you'll remember that Donald Trump would answer anything from any reporter. He didn't censor them. He didn't say, I won't answer your hard questions. He took them all. Remember all the photo ops at the helicopter. When's the last time you've seen Joe Biden be asked a serious or difficult question that doesn't kiss his ass? So, hold on, I'll wait. When is the last time you've seen Joe Biden answer a question from somebody who isn't his sycophant? And now the guy can't even read off a teleprompter without saying repeat line, emphasize line. He's Ron Burgundy. This is something sickening happening in the United States. And if you look at what the left is now thinking, when they're turning on Joe Biden, it tells you that what the right has been saying for about a year and a half was always correct, always right. And it's the people, and you can look at the numbers. People don't care about January 6th. People don't care about the Ukraine and Russia. They care about gas, inflation, crime, immigration. And if you don't think that they do, when the New York Times tells you that that's what their poll is revealing to them today, that people are more interested, and if you look at Twitter, they're more interested in Hunter Biden than they are the January 6 hearings. But nobody will ask Joe Biden a question. He has no media avails. He has no media opportunities. At least the bad orange man had the confidence or the guts to get in front of a camera and answer anything that was fired at him. And speaking of not answering questions, there is no greater embarrassment to the White House than Karine Jean-Pierre. Again, somebody who, because she ticks the right demographic checkboxes, two of them actually, nobody dares say a word while everybody realizes she is a disgrace to the White House podium. At least Sean Spicer made you know that he knew that you knew that he knew that he was lying to you about crowd sizes. At least you know that Jen Psaki, as partisan as she was, is an extraordinarily smart and well-prepared woman. Watch any clip of Karine Jean-Pierre answering any questions, especially the softballs. She has no business being there. It's an embarrassment to the public. It's an embarrassment to the press secretary position. And it's borderline, not only unwatchable, but she is the propagandist in chief. This has been the Ari Goldkind Show. I thank everybody for watching and listening this week on Sirius XM Canada Talks Channel 167. We'll see you next week, and I hope you enjoyed this hour.